In this video, we're going to go through and show you how to use text boxes to connect to a controller, and then you do some manipulation of the view when inputs happen in the within those text boxes. So let's create a new file. I'm going to call it index.html. And we'll add our Angular code snippet or our Angular script include. And now let's create a div, and this will be our ng app. So that creates our app scope. And I'm going to add some input boxes. Call them numbers. And here we're going to say ng model quantity. And then next we'll say input type equals number, ng model cost. So this will let us calculate, a simple total based on the quantity times the cost. I'm just going to wrap these two in a div. There we go. So it lines up nicely. And then we're going to add a third div, and this is where we'll calculate the total. What did I do? And in here, we'll use the Angular expression, and we'll call a function called calc, which will calculate our total for us. So now with the HTML written, then we're going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call this calc controller. And we'll edit this up. And function calc controller, pass in the scope. Let's set some defaults. So let's say scope.quantity. Now this is what's going to be bound to that HTML element that is bound to the quantity property of our model, or actually of the scope, I should say, but it's similar to the model. So I'm going to set the quantity to 1 by default, and we'll set cost to 10. So by default, when this loads, there will be a total calculated of 10. And you'll also see these inputs, 1 and 10, inside of the input boxes in the application. So now in order to define methods that we can call within our Angular data binding, the double bracket notation, we could just add it to the scope. So I'm going to add a function called calc. A function, return, and here we just do our multiply. So scope dot quantity times scope dot cost. And that'll be our calculator controller, and then this calc function we can then call from the HTML file. Once our controller function is complete and added to the scope, then when we come over here and reload our page, we'll see here that the two text boxes are bound, and you'll see the values 1 and 10, and that goes along with where we set our defaults of $scope.quantity is 1 and $scope.cost is 10. And that's what's pre-populating these text fields. And then you'll see here on our total that this scope.calc or $scope.calc is being called and returning, the multiplied value of quantity times cost. And if we flip back to our HTML, if you remember, here's where our inputs, ng model, are bound back to the scope of the controller, and ng model cost. And then here's our expression of calc in our double curly braces which will execute a function on the scope that will return that value and then insert it into the HTML.